Hello and welcome to this episode of the EV Bids Podcast. My name is Tori Hornsby. I have with me Rod Stuckey. How you doing, Rod?
I'm doing great, Tori. Good to be here as always.
The subject of this episode is how much does a used Tesla depreciate per month? And, this really is a great question. And most people don't necessarily think about the fact that their cars are a depreciating asset. Some vehicles obviously hold their value better than others, and some vehicles tend to depreciate faster in value. And so in this podcast, we're going to dive specifically into the used Tesla market, since they hold the largest percentage of market share in the EV space. And we're really in an interesting time where market values have been changing so quickly from, if you just look over the past several years, from pre-pandemic to during pandemic and now to post-pandemic. And it really can be quite confusing to understand depreciation in this time, especially for EVs. So in just a moment, we'll take a look at some real data that's up to date and that explains how we use software and other tools to evaluate depreciation and how we forecast Tesla fair market values. But before we dive off too deep into that, Rod, can you just give us an overview of the Tesla market right now and what's been happening with values and depreciation here in the late spring and early summer of 2024?
Yeah, sure thing. So as you mentioned, during the pandemic, it's no secret that there was a lot of money in circulation, and there became a huge demand for inventory. And kind of at that same time, because in part of the large circulation of money, the high demand, they had what in the automotive industry was a semiconductor. They called it the chip-demic. So there was a supply shortages on different components that were causing production delays. So there was just a really high demand, a lower amount of inventory. Then Hertz says, "Hey, we're going to place an order for 100,000 Teslas." And then, there was a buzz in the rideshare community where the Uber and Lyft folks were really thought, EVs were going to be the way for them, because obviously, your gas price is a big expense when you're in that line of work. And so this huge demand with a shortage of supply, it created these super inflated used Tesla values. And the daily and monthly depreciation, it was at an all-time low in history. In some cases, they were going for as much, as they were new, or even more. Mm-hmm. And it's just really a wild time in the automotive industry. I've been in and around the automotive industry as a dealer myself, and a student and practitioner of the industry for the last 3 decades. And the values were like nothing that I had ever seen. But fast forward just a couple of short years, and we're in 2024, and inflation really took off through the pandemic because there was all this money in circulation. And as the inflation continues to soar, they decide, hey, we got to try to get this under control. So they begin to raise the interest rates to cool the consumers off, and they raise them over and over again. And then the shortage in the semiconductors, finally kind of the supply chain issues, they mostly get resolved. And as those get resolved, Tesla continues to add additional manufacturing capabilities. They're beginning to kind of catch back up. They've all been behind, right? They've all been, lacking on supply. So they're pushing production. And then, consumer demand continues to flatten because we have the high interest rates. We have the inflation continue to soar. So now demand is slowing, supply is increasing. And then really kind of the perfect storm has happened here in the past, 12 to 24 months, where all of the other OEMs have entered the EV market. It's no secret that they're being pushed heavily from from the government. And so now you've got every legacy manufacturer producing EVs and trying to get a piece of this Tesla market share. And so it's, now Tesla's got a lot of additional competition. They've got an excess in inventory, and then all of these other OEMs entering the market. So what does Elon decide to do? Elon decides, hey, we're going to have to maintain our market share. So he lowers prices on the new units to stay competitive, which has a big impact. There's a trickle down. When Elon goes and lowers prices on new vehicles, what does that do to people that paid, in some cases 10, 15, 20% more? Their depreciation takes a huge hit. Now, Hertz decides EVs aren't exactly so great for the rental market.
Who'd have thought?
And turns out that's not working out so well. People don't want to be in a strange town renting a vehicle and not know how to use it, or have to have it charged and rely on that. So they decide they're going to sell off thousands of their fleet. And so, all this kind of has created this perfect storm where now depreciation is, going from basically zero per day per month to, as we're going to talk about here, well over $1,000 per month on a lot of models. So just kind of a quick recap.
And I know a lot of people listening to this are probably thinking, well, I kind of makes sense. Who probably could have seen that coming a little bit, but you mentioned.
But it's happened so fast. I mean, it's almost as I go through that little recap, it's like I can't even believe how fast this market has changed. It has just been like greased lightning, and people that don't pay attention to it regularly still think that they're, they bought back during the pandemic, and they just think that they got this car that's holding its value like a Barrett Jackson classic, and it's just not that way in this market now.
It's not. And the price cut for some models for the more expensive plaids was upwards of like 30, almost 35%. So not even 20%, 35%. Yep. And there's no way that type of price cut on new, especially, you could get a used one, and now the price of that used one is higher than you can get a new one. It makes a tremendous difference when they cut the prices of the new. By the way, you mentioned Grease Lightning, and you almost have me over here getting into some John Travolta singing. Can't have that pop culture Grease Lightning mention without a little song, but I'm going to hold back. We're not going to do any singing today. But I do thank you for that recap, Rod. That was good. It explains why we're seeing the significant depreciation that we're seeing right now. And I think, let's pull up some actual data from our AccuTrade software, and we can see, what the real world market is doing right now. And let me get my screen share going here. And for those of you who are just listening to the audio version, we'll do a good job today of explaining what we're looking at, so that you don't have to feel like you're missing out on anything. So can you see my screen here, Rod?
Yes.
So our AccuTrade software, some of you guys will look at this, and if you followed our other podcasts, in the podcast where we went through and described how we determine vehicle values, you've seen AccuTrade. This was the tool that we use to showcase how we do reserve pricing and come up with EV values. So you'll be familiar with it from that standpoint. But I do want to take a look at just a couple of vehicles today and show you what the depreciation looks like and what it's based on. I'm not going to go through the numbers here. We're looking at a 2019 Tesla Model 3 long-range all-wheel drive with 62,000 miles. These numbers, again, I went through these numbers specifically and did a deep dive into them on our how we determine used EV value video. So refer back to that if you're interested and haven't seen that yet. But today I want to take a look and focus over here in the right-hand corner of the screen where it says scorecard here. So there's a lot of factors that impact depreciation. And I would say, a couple of the biggest ones here are the mileage, the history, which we'll talk about more in a second here, the market day supply, and then local days on market for for how long a vehicle's been listed. We'll delve into that just a little bit here in a second. But on this 2019 Tesla Model 3 long range all-wheel drive, we can see here the depreciation daily of this specific model is $25.89 per day. And if we compare that to, let's say here, a 2018 Tesla Model X, 53,000 miles, you can see the daily depreciation of this is $39.04 per day. And I like this daily metric, Rod, because that's not, you don't, as you've mentioned to me before this meeting, you don't really think on a daily basis like, hey, this vehicle's sitting in my garage or out my driveway. It has lowered in value today. It has depreciated today. A certain
I lost $40 for my Model X sitting in my garage out here on charge. That like what?
I didn't even drive it. And it lost $40.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
So, I'm not picking on a Model X. It doesn't matter if it's an ICE vehicle or what. I mean, vehicles depreciate, and it's kind of it's just a different perspective when you think about it from a daily perspective.
And of course, that carries over into the monthly amount of depreciation. And this is where you start realizing especially if you're selling a vehicle, maybe you should take a little less than you plan to because of how much it's losing value every single month. Taking a look at this 2019 Tesla Model 3, the daily depreciation was $25.89, which means the monthly depreciation, $776.70. So now you start thinking about this vehicle that you have sitting in your garage or in your driveway is losing close to $800 per month. And moving over and looking at that same Model X, it had a higher daily amount, which carries over to the monthly amount. This Model X depreciates at nearly $1,200 a month. And I think that that's an important note to consider. As I mentioned a second ago, we see people who, whether they're looking at reserve prices or whether they just have their vehicle listed on Facebook Marketplace, and maybe they get an offer that's $500 or $600 less than what they considered their lowest price was, and they pass up on that offer. Well, if it was $600, let's say, for this 2018 Model X, and it takes a month to get another buyer to come through and give you an offer, you lost an additional $600. You should have just taken the $600 hit right then, because that's turned into a $1,200 depreciation. And that's real money, $1,200.
Yeah, in your example, you remind me of one of our customers recently who was telling us that his kids were on his insurance, and because of that, his insurance was $500 a month. And so, in that same case, if your payment's $600 a month, and then your insurance is $500 a month, and you're holding out because you're in denial about your depreciation, and your carrying costs are real. I mean, if it's depreciation by $1,100 a month, and your payments $600 a month, and your insurance is $500 a month, you're like going the wrong way in a hurry.
Right. Yeah, that's real money. $500 payment and a $500 insurance cost per month and $1,200 of depreciation. That's $2,200. It makes taking $500 or $600 less make a lot more sense.
Yeah.
And so looking at a couple of different models here, we've looked at a 3 and an X, and carrying over here to a Y. This is a long range 2022 Model Y with 30,000 miles. And you can see here that the depreciation is closer to the X at $3,849 daily, $1,154.70 monthly. And then carrying over here to the Model S, because we have to do the whole sexy, right? You have to do all the 4 main models. And the Model S, this is an older car. And so part of you might think, like I thought naturally, that an older vehicle doesn't depreciate quite as much. And we see that that's true, at least at some level, but they still do depreciate at times at a very high amount. This 2014 Model S Performance with 57,000 miles is depreciating at $25 a day or $752 per month. So even the older vehicles they're not free and clear from being what's the word I'm looking for? Acceptable. Is that a word? Did I say that right? For depreciation, they're still very much impacted by depreciation. The older units are.
It is interesting to your point, though, when you're looking at that last 2022 model versus a 2014 model, we see, $1,100 versus $750. A 2022 model arguably could be impacted significantly more in a faster depreciation from a price drop on the new side. So Elon goes and lowers prices, then this 22 is going to be hit a lot harder than that 2014. Now, another thing, we've all heard, hey, when you drive the car off the lot, it drops in value significantly. So it is the pandemic reality, or that little false market we had. We're back to the reality of the real world. When you drive a new vehicle off the lot, you're getting significant depreciation. So you do see oftentimes, and that's why you'll find when, in the car business, when someone goes and wants to trade in a newer model, they're often disappointed because they have negative equity and they can't trade it in. And that's why really, to trade in a vehicle, you got to try to keep it for 3 to 5 years so that you can, put yourself in a position to have equity and earn out that increased depreciation that you get during the early years of owning it.
It's definitely higher. Just like for our business guys out there in accounting, when you're depreciating, you can depreciate assets at a higher level up front and then less as you go. Typically is how you see that. It's like an amortization schedule on a mortgage. You're paying a lot more interest up front as a percentage of your payment. And then as you get into the loan, you're paying a lot more, or a lot less interest, a lot more going to the principal. And, I think we do see that here with 2022 that has a higher value. It's depreciating at a higher value, 1,154. And so you go, well, that's about the same amount as the Model X. Well, what's impacting this Model X? It's got a ding on the vehicle history report. So it's got a problem with the vehicle history report. And we can actually specifically pull it up and take a look and see what that is. It's been an accident. So if a car's been in an accident, it's typically going to depreciate faster.
And you can see they show a 3,000. It shows they're taking over $3,000 off of the value. I think like 3175,
3275,
3275. They're taking off of it for a bad vehicle history report. So that obviously accelerates your daily and monthly depreciation as well.
Yep, as well as, and so that would explain why the 2018 that's worth, 33,000 versus a Model Y that's a 2022 that's worth $34,000. The values are close, and so you're going to see maybe a similar depreciation. But this one is, it's 4 years newer, and so not only does the VHR impact it, but also the market day supply. So this depreciation could be a little bit lower because there's only a 7-day market supply right now for a 2022 Tesla Model Y. However, when we combine that over, and this one actually doesn't make much sense to me, the local days on market, this means locally from where I am, how many days does a Model Y ad stay live? How long is it listed on cars.com or Auto Trader or Marketplace, et cetera? And it's 186 days, which this one doesn't necessarily make sense, because typically when you have a high, local days on market, you have a high days daily supply. There's more units, therefore they stay on market longer. So that one's a little weird. But when we get over here, now we see one that makes more sense of what we typically see. And for this Model S, this is a 2014 Model S we were looking at a second ago, 96-day market supply, which means that this should take about 96 days to sell if you list it today. And then days on market, we can see aligns with that 110 days on market for the local ads on Facebook, cars.com, Auto Trader type of thing.
And
so
if you go back, Tori, to the Model 3 and the Model X, that one kind of was interesting to me. I look at this Model 3 and I say, I've got a 24 Well, when you look at the daily or the monthly depreciation, it's only depreciating by $700 a month. And you say, well, how come the Model 3 depreciates significantly less than the Model X? Well, there's a lot of variables, but in this case, it's kind of interesting. 24-day market supply, 700. Now go over to that X, and you've got it's 83 days on the local days on market, 30-day supply there, and 1171 monthly. So the local days on market was, I believe, the number maybe I was looking at that was significantly different. So you just have a lot more of a supply for sale out there of these X's than you do the 3s, in comparison to the buyers, not necessarily in comparison to the number of units, but in comparison to the supply and demand, the number of buyers versus the number of units out there.
Yep. And this one is being impacted again, just to be clear, the Model X is by the bad vehicle history report. So that's throwing off the clear comparison between, market days there. But this also is being impacted by the tax credit. I'm very thankful for the used EV tax credit, the $4,000, because it has made the used EV market really hot the first quarter and going into late spring of 2024. It's very hot, and we're processing a lot of tax credit deals for private party sales where somebody wants to sell. They're not listing on our auction site necessarily, but Bob is selling his Model 3 and Nancy wants to buy it, and we just broker the deal and apply the tax credit. So we're doing that a lot. Well, in the long run, I think that we'll see that impact a little bit, of the depreciation, because when Uncle Sam is paying for $4,000 of the vehicle, the psychology behind that from a buying perspective is, I didn't buy this car for $22,000. I bought it for $18,000. And so people are going to be willing to sell it for a little less in the future. So long-term depreciation impact will be there. For the short term, it likely is actually making depreciation a little lower because more people are buying right now. And whenever sales are hot and things are moving, the depreciation tends to be a little better than if things are stale and stagnant in a market area. So, in summary, all this can be a bit confusing, but, the original, question that we opened up with was, how much does a used Tesla depreciate per month? Man, it just depends. It depends on the market. It depends on the history report, the mileage. It depends on the how many are currently listed, how long they take to sell right now, and if Elon's going to lower the prices of new Teslas. There's just so many different factors that impact that. If anybody is interested in getting a free market analysis for their vehicle, if they're looking to sell it, shoot us an email at info@evbids.com, and we'll be happy to provide a complimentary market report. Be more than happy to do that for you. But what we're seeing right now in this market, in again, late spring to early summer 2024, is upper $600 to $700 on the low side of depreciation per month, all the way up to $1,200 per month on the high side. But this is something that could change in a week, right? It just depends.
And it varies. The Model 3 was just announced as the number one, just this past month, the number one used vehicle sought after. It was number 3 behind, I think, F-150 and Chevrolet truck, but number one car. So, it varies between, like you said, not just mileage and days supply. Your depreciation is going to be different because if there's more of a demand for a Model 3 than there is your Model S, that impacts the value. So between the different Tesla models, there can be a significant variation from that $650 to $1,200 depreciation we're seeing as well. Vehicle history reports, et cetera, et cetera. So there's just a lot of variations, and that's why we love our AccuTrade software, and we love having a tool that goes out there and scrapes data from all across the web, and we can look at auction values from auctions all over the country. We can look at the supply and demand all over dealers' websites all over the country, and really use their algorithm to help us make accurate and informed decisions, because there's a lot to it. It really is.
Yep. And hopefully this data was valuable to anybody looking to buy or sell a Tesla. For those looking to sell, just keep in mind, I mean, a good number is $700 to $1,200. If you split the difference there and you call it $950 to $1,000 a month, that your used Tesla is depreciating right now. And that might make a difference in the deal that you're willing to accept if you're selling your Tesla. And if you're looking for somebody to apply the tax credit, we're more than happy to do it. It's free for sellers. We take a small fee out of the tax credit on the buyer side. So again, reach out to us at info@evbids.com. Shoot us an email or give us a shout out. Gosh, I don't have our number memorized. Let me pull that up. I'll give you our number, and then we'll call it a day here. Our number is 770-756-9298. 770-756-9298. Appreciate you guys joining us today. For Rod Stuckey and all of us at EV Bids, I'm Tori Hornsby, and we'll see you on the next episode.
See you.